Well, it's now 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Melanie Ross, and I will be the facilitator of this webinar today. Our presenter is Ryan Fisher, a Senior Accreditation Manager for ANAB. Thank you for joining us for this complimentary webinar on Measurement Decision Rules 101. I do want to note that the information provided today is from a non-forensic, laboratory-related viewpoint. Lastly, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available for future viewing. Before I introduce Ryan, here are some logistics. Due to the amount of attendance, everyone will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. At any time during the webinar, you may enter your questions into the Q&A box. Please submit the questions. All of the questions asked. While working with 2 calibration laboratories accredited to ISO IEC 17025, Ryan's duties consisted of working from a quality system consisting of more than 150 work instructions for dimensional, physical, and mechanical calibrations. He also was involved in accreditation assessments and implementing and reacting to preventive and corrective actions. Ryan joined the Laboratory Accreditation Bureau prior to its acquisition by ANAB in 2003 as a technical coordinator and later became calibration program manager. While with LAB, he embraced the proficiency testing program to monitor the PTs and ILCs of all their accredited laboratories. He is currently an ANAB Senior Manager of Accreditation for Calibration and Dimensional Measurement Laboratories. With that, I'll pass the ball to Ryan so he can get started.
Thank you very much as well today. I want to thank everybody for attending this and having this one-on-one discussion here. Some goals that we want to get through over the next hour for the webinar is to understand some of the areas of 17025 2017 as it relates to the measurement decision rules. With that, we have to understand the links between the measurement decision rules, uncertainty, statements of conformance, and risk. So we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. We have to understand how to make a proper decision. That decision through mitigating the risk, what kind of risk is it associated to the conformity assessment body, and hopefully take away some knowledge and some tools back to your own setting so that everyone can have some risk-based thinking, measurement uncertainty, understanding, and the decision rules that are inherent for you as the cab, and hopefully work through with some ease. As in respect to the standard, there's a few definitions that we're going to talk about. What's defined as risk, measurement uncertainty, and decision rules. We'll take a look at the relevant clauses. We're not going to get in depth with those. We'll just scratch the surface as to where they are in the standard. What are the steps for risk-based thinking? We'll cover some of those. We'll take a look at some examples of risk, and the examples that we'll see as part of the presentation are taken from ILAC G8, which was recently released. Talk about how the links with contract review are associated with risk, uncertainty, and statements of conformance, and talk about some opportunities for improvement. First, we have to understand risk management from the context of the standard. Looking at the overall ISO verbiage, ISO standards provide requirements, specifications, and guidelines or characteristics for a certain industry. This presentation, this webinar, we're going to focus on the conformity assessment bodies for non-forensics testing, calibration, and dimensional measurement. But we have to understand the intent to ensure that materials, products, processes, and services are fit for the intended purpose. And that intended purpose is not only for the conformity assessment body, but also for the customers that are requesting the service. So what is risk? Risk is an effect of uncertainty, and we're not talking about measurement uncertainty, even though we can spill that into that conversation. But what is the effect on the uncertainty of the situation? On the uncertainty of the situation, whether you're purchasing new equipment or you get in your vehicle and we have to obey the speed limits. What is the risk if we decide to go 15 miles an hour over the speed limit as opposed to going the speed limit? So that's the kind of effect of uncertainty that we have when we start to think about risk. Deviation from the expected cause by a shortage of information or misinformation or the misinterpretation of the information. That's an educational thing, and also especially when we get into contract review, we have to have the scope of work defined. It has to be understood, and it has to be documented so that everybody between the cab and the customer, we all understand the service that is needed and can be provided. And with the risk, we have positive and negative effects. One negative effect could be nonconformities. The positive effect of analyzing risk can be opportunities for improvement. Neither of them are bad situations, but there are repercussions of situations, whether they're good or bad, that we have to learn from. What is measurement uncertainty? Uncertainty, by definition, is doubt. We're just unsure totally of the situation. You hear on commercials or somebody describing how accurate it is or how precise it is, or that type of situation. There's a level of uncertainty that goes into that. Not everything is 100% accurate. Uncertainty of measurement means the doubt on the validity of the result of the measurement. There's a confidence factor that's associated with that, and we're not going to be 100% certain that the measurements or the results that are provided are what they are expected to be. Measurement uncertainty is a parameter associated with, and this is the definition from the VIM and from the JCGM 100, which is the GUM. Uncertainty of measurement is a parameter associated with the result of the measurement that characterizes the dispersion of values that could reasonably be attributed to the measuring. And when we get into the GUM, this JCGM 100, it'll describe out what type A contributors are and what type B contributors are. Decision rule. Rules describe how measurement uncertainty is accounted for when stating conformity with the specified requirement. The big document that we use as a guidance document is from ILAC G8, and that's a document for statements of conformance and decisions as part of that. But certainly as part of this decision rule, we have to have it clearly identified and defined within the contract review portion of 17025, and that's clause 7.1. If the cab is making the rule, there has to be an agreement with the customer, and that rule can be associated with some sort of standard. It can be associated with a business decision that the cab made, and whatever that rule is that the cab is coming up with, that the customer has to understand it and agree upon it. And as part of anything else within the scope of work, it has to be documented and taken into account the level of risk. Here's a snapshot of the areas of 17025 that cover risk. Like I said, leading into this, we're not going to dive into each one of these specifically, But risk is part of the newly revised 17025 is taken hold in there, and I personally commend the writing of the working group for bringing these things out into the standard. Not only is it going to make us better, but as a conformity assessment body, but it'll make us better for our measurement processes. So reporting the results, this has been an area of discussion over the past, at least 15 years. When a statement of conformance is made, and a statement of conformance is, anything that it's good or bad, green or red, it passes or fails, any indication that it's meeting a specification, or a statement that it's meeting a specification, that's considered a statement of conformity. So along with that, when we report that out to our customers, there's a level of risk that's associated with that, and the decision rule, and we'll cover some of those here in a little bit. But that decision rule has to be agreed upon between the conformity assessment body and the customer. There's a possibility that we could falsely accept the measurement, or we could falsely reject the measurement, and also the level of risk can be associated under statistical assumptions. Areas of 17025 that talk about uncertainty. It's expanded out quite a bit from the 2005 version. The requirements for calibration are pretty sound. Testing, it just depends on what kind of test is being performed, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. But we can see, specifically the areas of 17025 that has discussion and requirements about uncertainty. There's a couple of clauses that I do want to talk about here under 645 and 646, and it's basically concerning the requirements of making the best sound decision when we choose a type of equipment to purchase, and we have to understand that from the standpoint of achieving the results of not only what we need internally, so maybe we're doing internal calibrations or tests, but also what the customers expect. We have to understand that when we're purchasing that equipment, because if a supplier wants us to buy, this huge piece of equipment that drives like a Cadillac, and maybe we don't need that Cadillac because our customers aren't asking us for that type of quality or precision, then maybe there's a lesser grade of equipment that we can purchase to meet our customers' needs and our internal needs. We have to know what the customers want out of the service, whether you're a captive situation, being an internal customer or an external customer. What is the specification of the product or equipment that we're testing or calibrating? And what are the possible decision rules for that situation? We have to understand the calibration intervals of that equipment. Understanding the risk, and we may deal with it, especially in these times right now where our suppliers may not be working during the pandemic. Well, stuff needs to be recalibrated. Well, what do we do in that situation? Do we have enough historical data to make a decision whether we can extend out that calibration cycle and still have confidence in that piece of equipment that's performing the measurements that our customers expect and that we expect? Evaluation of measurement uncertainty. We'll just scratch the surface here because there's other webinars and other training sessions that dig into this in more depth. But One, we have to understand the components of uncertainty. What are the contributors to the measurement process, and how significant are those contributors? Does the conformity assessment body perform their own calibrations? If so, then the standard tells us that we have to compute uncertainty for that. What is the uncertainty associated with the calibration provider on their calibration certificates? We've all seen, that statement on the certs that we get back from our supplier that, whatever the uncertainty is, and they'll probably make a statement that it's computed approximately at 95% with a coverage factor of K equals 2. That's the kind of information that we're looking for on the certificate, and also does it meet the needs of our system meaning the conformity assessment body system, and also the customer's expectations. And we have another possibility that uncertainty is identified as part of a test method. Does the test method talk about which specific components need to be significant as part of that uncertainty analysis? When we're stepping through that method, that test method that may identify what those key contributors are they reasonable for our situation, or does our situation present other components that either whether the standard deemed them insignificant or not, but they may be significant to the situation that the laboratory is in, or maybe the customer has presented some sort of requirements and special things that they want considered. So how does all that fit into those components as the test method has identified? And is the uncertainty appropriate in relation to the specification? Now that's a conversation where we may have heard the term test uncertainty ratio, where the uncertainty is a certain percentage of the specification. For years it's been accepted and understood, and in most industries that a 4-to-1 ratio is acceptable. Some industries may say 3-to-1. Some industries may say 10-to-1. We have to understand that from the perspective of how we're computing uncertainties and the contributors that go into that situation. In the development of uncertainty, there's a design of experiment that we have to understand. There's two different sides. The best design of experiment, we have unlimited money and we have unlimited time to go through and analyze data. We've got the ability to go out and get the best equipment because that's the expectation that our customers have. And we have to have resources dedicated to analyzing the previous history, previous performance history of the equipment that we're using, understanding the environment that we're in, understanding the personnel that we're using to perform the test or calibrations, and then the simple design of experiment, which is probably the most common that we run into in our industry, is that from a budgetary standpoint, individuals or the conformity assessment body management may only dedicate a certain amount of time for their personnel to dig into that data, dig into the situation of how the environment is operating. Can it be reduced? Can we go out and buy data loggers that may cost $400, but in reality, it allows us to dig a little bit deeper into how the environment is performing during the test or during the calibration or over a 24-hour period. And when do we have the time to do that? It's always a great suggestion that conformity assessment body personnel suggest to their management or to the ownership that, hey, is it possible that I can have 15 minutes a week to go out and dig into previous calibration certificates to really hone in on how the equipment is performing year in and year out when we send it out? Is it possible that we can, dedicate time to understand the deltas between our intermediate checks? How is the equipment performing every month? Stuff like that. That's a great suggestion to go back to management and ask them to dedicate at least 15 minutes a week. And in all reality too is that it'll be a huge benefit that when the uncertainty analysis come up for review, probably on an annual basis or however often the equipment is recalibrated, to really understand the time that's dedicated to that process. If we have that constant refresher to get into how the whole system is performing, the risk that's associated with that, it'll make that review a lot easier, as opposed to if we put everything off until that point, it may triple the time to re-educate ourselves to, understand what this contributor was at that time. What is the risk associated with the calibration interval, things like that. But it's a good practice, and hopefully some of you will be able to adopt that and make the situation better. Here's a little fishbone diagram of uncertainty, how it's associated with the requirements of the standard, and in all actuality, if we look at it from the standpoint of significant contributors, we can see what the standard is telling us through personnel, the method that we use, if sampling is part of our process, environmental conditions, how traceability impacts the overall results, and the suppliers that we use to give us those services. Areas of 17025 that cover the statement of conformity and decision rules in the 2017 version. We talked about, and we'll dig into a little bit more about how 7.1.3 is significant to the overall process. And myself, I consider that clause, or those clauses within 7.1, to be the most significant, because without that information, the personnel that are performing the test or performing the calibrations may not have the whole scope of work to do the job correctly. So we have to make sure that things are defined appropriately, make sure that they're documented appropriately, and make sure that everybody understands the situation for the service that's been requested. Okay, so looking at reporting the statements of conformity, if a statement of conformity is made, the CAB must document the decision rule taking into account the level of risk. And that's a requirement of the standard. A decision rule takes uncertainty, or in these cases, statistical assumption of the measurement into account. And we'll show the couple of examples that I have here can give us a good visualization of what that looks like to a specification and a measurement point. And those will come up here in a few minutes. As part of, and this looks very similar to how uncertainty is discussed and considered as part of 17025. This is the whole big picture according to the standard. Not only do we focus on the technical requirements of the standard, we also have the quality support in Section 8 that we have to make those decisions as part of the corrective action process or an improvement process. All of that goes into account when we're looking at this. And the big feeder for this whole situation is 7.1, the contract review standpoint. And there's going to be some of the areas that have outside influence, such as specifier or regulator requirements. The FDA may have special requirements. AOAC may have special requirements. The military branches may have separate requirements. So all of that, plays into this whole role of how risk is accounted for, how uncertainty is accounted for, and what kind of decision rule that we have for the whole process. Okay, so an example that just a quick visualization of how we can see what we have here is that in the black down at the bottom, we've got a lower limit, we have a nominal, and we have an upper limit. As part of the measurement process, the blue dots that we see there may be the actual measurement that's happening, and with the lines extending from the blue dot, that's uncertainty. So that the top line there, we can see how the uncertainty breaches that upper limit. What is the risk associated with that? There's a good possibility that the statement that we make is with the blue dot that is passing, but there's a probability that we could be falsely accepting that measurement because our uncertainty extends beyond the upper limit. Whereas the case below it, where the uncertainty is a little bit tighter to the measured value, we can see that the limits of uncertainty are not breaching the upper limit or the lower limit, so we can confidently say that with this measurement, as we found it, that with the inclusion of uncertainty, we can effectively say it passes. Another example of looking at it from a guard banding standpoint, we guard band the upper specification, the lower specification, and we can see our blue dots there, that each one of those blue dots are falling inside of that guard band. So once again, we can say that these measurements are pretty sound according to the information that we've come up with, the level of uncertainty that we've done, the rigor of uncertainty that we've done, and we can effectively say that these measurements are pretty sound. Looking at it from another perspective of the simple acceptance rule, there's a really good possibility here that we're 50% right or 50% wrong. In those cases, are the middle two examples. The first example that we see there on the left, where the measurement is found with the extension of uncertainty, both of those situations are falling inside the upper and lower specification limit, so we can effectively say that it passes. The second one, the measurement result that was found is still inside the specification, but we extend it into, we have the extension of uncertainty, and it breaches the limits. So there's a probability that we falsely accept that measurement with the extension of uncertainty. The next one there, we can see that the measured value is beyond the upper specification limit or the lower specification limit. With the extension of the uncertainty, there's a possibility that we falsely accept or falsely reject. We falsely reject the measurement because uncertainty brings it back into the specification limit. And then the far right example, the measurement is beyond the specification limits. We extend that measurement with uncertainty, and we can see that it is actually failing this situation. So looking at it from a binary statement with guard banding, the passing situation that we see here, the acceptance based on the guard band, the measurement result being below the acceptance limit. That's a situation where that we're going to have a conversation with the customer, and is this appropriate, or are you accepting this situation, so that we can report out the values or whatever it may be. But also understand too that with any of these situations, once we put a statement of conformance on the report, the standard tells us we have to go through and define what these decision rules are. The standard says when a statement of conformance is required. It doesn't say that it has to be there. It just says when we put a statement of conformance on there, and that when should probably be driven by the customer. There may be some industries that require a statement of conformance, but the practice from the conformity assessment body, it should be that we just want to present the results to the customer and let them decide. So here's a conditional pass, the probability of false accept, probability of false reject. We have a conditional pass and a conditional fail. That with a conditional pass, the measurement result being inside the guard band and below the tolerance limit in the interval, and the conditional fail is that the measurement result being above the tolerance limit but below the tolerance limit at the guard band within the intervals as well. This is an example that's inside ILAC G8 that my buddies Bob Stern and John Harbin put together. And it's a nice little flow chart for those that want to present this situation to a customer, and even if you want to adopt it inside your own quality system. Just going through the start to finish. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but certainly it's something that we can bring into your situation and have that as a leading discussion with your customer as part of contract review. If the situation is starting out that is a conformity decision required, no, then that circumstance just warrants the measurements reported out and report out the uncertainty and let them make the decision. But certainly, looking at it from this standpoint and bringing it into the quality system process, it promotes that discussion to make sure that we're covering the requirements that 17025 is asking us to cover. Decision rule documentation and application. I've said it a few times, and it's extremely important. If there's anything that we take away with this webinar, is that the situation has to be defined, documented, and understood between all parties. Whether that's the reporting out of uncertainty, defining a decision rule, the risk associated with that decision rule, everything has to be agreed upon with the customer. And we may need to provide a level of risk for the customers to choose. And that could be a situation. I'll go back a couple slides here, just as an example. Maybe this is the choosing for the customer. We can provide a conditional pass. We can provide a conditional fail. We can certainly say that it passes as long as uncertainty and the measurement don't breach the upper and lower specification limit. If it does breach it and we have that situation, we've got a conditional pass or conditional fail. So those would be, a good example of things that we can choose from that standpoint. And more complicated decision rules, include the following: documentation of supporting factors such as statistical assumptions, including the type of risk, specific or global, specific or global risk, and measurement uncertainty. Documentation of the conformity assessment type and statements of conformance, and compatibility of the decision rule documentation with the test and calibration records. Also inside ILAC G8, it gives a nice little checklist as we're going through the requirements of the standard. And also, just like we saw with that flow chart, it's another good point of conversation, not only internally with the quality system itself, just to make sure that we have everything documented and recorded, but also a conversation with the customer as part of contract review. And by the way, if you want to search in an internet search engine, just type in ILAC G8, and I believe I think it was released in 2019, maybe early 20. But you can go through and download that. It's a free document, and all accreditation bodies use that in some form or fashion as guidance when we're discussing statements of conformance and reporting out the results with the inclusion of uncertainty. So what should we do here? First and foremost, we have to define risk management and what is inherent measurement risk based on the uncertainty of measurements that you perform. That's a level of risk. If we look at a situation where uncertainty is computed at an ultrally conservative standpoint, where we want to ensure that we cover everything to the fullest extent, well, there's a possibility that unless that measurement is spot on nominal, there's a good chance that the uncertainty, with the extension of uncertainty, that report out would probably fail. So we have to understand, do we want to try to do the best that we can and drill down the best that we can on the contributors and do that design of experiment to understand what each one of those contributors mean to the overall process. That's only going to help us out. Assure you and your customers have agreements if you're taking the next steps to making a statement of conformance based on the decision risk. That's one, first and foremost. We have to, again, define, document, and understand that. And the agreement has to be in place with the customer. So with that, again, we just scratch the surface, and if anything, take a deep dive into 7.1 of 17025 for the contract review side of things, and take a deep dive into each of those areas for uncertainty, risk, and reporting out the results concerning the statements of conformance with the customer, with you internally, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. That's the biggest thing. Melanie, I think I'm at the point where I can turn it over to you now.
Yes, absolutely. If you'll drag the WebEx ball back up to my name, then I'll take control. That was a great presentation. Thanks, Ryan.
You're asking a monumental task here to drag the ball.
If you look next to your name, actually, I think as the host, I can do it. Here, I'm doing it.
Yeah. Okay, you do it. There you go. Thank you.
Now I'm the presenter. Okay, well, again, great presentation, Ryan. I really appreciate you going through all those slides. We have had a few questions come through, not very many. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A box available to you in WebEx. We'll get to those after we discuss some additional resources that are available for accredited laboratories or laboratories that are seeking accreditation. ANAB has many different media to further your understanding of standards, accreditation, management systems, and assessments. On the ANAB website, there are free webcasts on a variety of topics. These webcasts are between 5 and 20 minutes long, depending on the topic, and can be viewed at any time. If there's a topic you're interested in and a webcast isn't available, contact us, and we'll put it into our queue for development. ANAB also has a blog page with a wealth of information related to risk, accreditation, standards requirements, and many other topics. We offer webinars, such as this one, at least monthly, and like the webcasts, are always looking for new ideas and topics for these webinars. For accredited laboratories, ANAB uses the Heads Up to send pertinent information on documentation, policies, and procedures, as well as general information for the accredited laboratories. All of the historical laboratory-related Heads Up can be found on the ANAB website at the address shown here. Finally, ANAB offers training in many different areas, including internal auditing, standard requirements, risk, and other topics. Training has changed significantly with the pandemic and travel restrictions, so all of our traditional in-person courses have been converted to online versions, which include exercises, small group discussions, and question and answer sessions that are related to the topic at hand. We also offer web-based self-paced training. All of these resources can be found on the ANAB website at anab.ansi.org. If you would like additional information about training offered by ANAB, you can contact us at training@anab.org. If you have questions about accreditation or the services ANAB provides related to accreditation, contact ANAB at anab.org. And finally, if you are ready for a quote for accreditation services, contact Roger Muse at rmuse@anab.org. Now let's move on to your questions. Since we are recording this webinar, we will continue past the hour if needed to ensure all of the questions are answered. Feel free to stay, or you can access the recording once it is available on the ANAB website at the link at the bottom of this slide. So first, the first question that came through is, do I have to provide the measurement uncertainty on the calibration certificate if I give a result and the decision rule?
The answer to that is yes. I guess unless it's agreed upon with the customer that uncertainty does not have to be reported, then we can go down that path. But the contract review side of things, the standard allows us to report out simplified versions. But from a customer standpoint, it's a good thing to report out so that they can see the measurement result, they can see the uncertainty, how it's mathematically, and they can probably do a mathematical combination of that to sum out whether it's good or bad. But certainly the standard does require conformity assessment bodies to maintain records to produce the uncertainty if it's not reported. And again, if it's not reported, it has to be agreed upon with the customer. Good laboratory practice, report all three.
Great. The next one is, what guidelines will tell us the threshold for measurement uncertainty to be acceptable?
Oh, that's like a loaded gun question. It's a part A and part B type question. The first side of things is that we have to understand what our customers' expectations are. And through an interview with the customer, if we ask them, what kind of tolerances or specifications are you expecting, and they'll tell us, whatever that value is. The next part, the part B, is to take a look at our own measurement capabilities, our own test capabilities, to see if our uncertainty that we produced is meeting their expectations. So if for instance, if they have a tolerance of, and I'm just throwing this out there as simple math, if they have a tolerance of plus or minus 4, and our uncertainty is plus or minus 1, then we can effectively say that we have the capabilities to meet their expectations, because our uncertainty is 75% less than what their capabilities that they're expecting. So we can effectively say that that's a situation where we can present them with an appropriate uncertainty for the measurement results that, the measurement specifications that they set forward. There are other sides of it where our uncertainty may be a one-to-one scenario where our uncertainty is as big as that specification that the customer wants. That's where we have to discuss with the customer, and they'll tell us, okay, that's good enough, or it's not good enough. If it is good enough, effectively, we can't say that it passes or fails, because our uncertainty is so large that it consumes 100% of their specification. In that circumstance, it's just best that we provide them with the measurement result, provide them with the uncertainty, and let them make the decision whether those results are good for their production or their process or whatever it may be. And it just helps remove the liability from the conformity assessment body standpoint, to say that you just provided the results and then they made the decision whether it was good or bad for them.
Great. So the next one is, what do you mean by test uncertainty ratio? Where do we use it? And is it included on certificates we provide with customers?
Yeah, a little segue into the previous conversation. Test uncertainty ratio is the expansion of the plus or minus tolerance. So if we have a plus or minus, if we have a tolerance of 4, so we have plus 4 and minus 4. So we've got a total of 8. So if we can envision inside of our room that you're sitting in, cutting it in half, that's the total specification limit that is set forth for that tester, for that measurement. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is the expansion of uncertainty. That's also a plus or minus value. So let's say our uncertainty is 1. So we have a plus 1 and a minus 1. The summation of that is 2. You have a total of 2 that you can operate within. So the numerator would be 8 and the denominator is 2. So we do that math. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. We can effectively say that no matter what the situation is, our uncertainty is good enough for the expected results, the expected specification that our customers are wanting us to meet. So on the reporting side of things, it used to be very common prior to 17025 and even leading into the 2017 version, where a test uncertainty ratio would be identified on a calibration certificate. Those days are going to the wayside. There's still some industries that want to see that situation, but essentially it should be washed out through the contract review standpoint of what 17025 is looking at, and also the standpoint of making sure our equipment is capable of meeting the measurement accuracy. Not only, is capable of meeting the specification for the accuracy, but also the uncertainty of measurement too. So if we're expecting a measurement uncertainty of 1, and our measurement equipment that we bought in our process is giving us a 4, then we really have to understand, did we buy the right piece of equipment? Do we have to go out and get that more precise piece of equipment to get us closer to our expectation? I think I covered those 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The next one is, what are the pros and cons in the use of measurement capability index in decision rules?
If by meaning measurement capability index, if that's like a list of uncertainties for the measurement results or the measurement parameters that we're trying to achieve, or a scope of accreditation, it really comes down to you know, whether our customers have a specification that we can meet or not. I mean, that's the basis of this decision rule. And we can throw out any type of number for uncertainty. We can measure any value, but unless those decision rules are understood by both sides, meaning the conformity assessment body and the customer, we have to go back on our competence as a conformity assessment body, our experience as a conformity assessment body that says, our measurement process is sound for X amount of decision rules, or maybe it's appropriate for all decision rules that may be produced by our customers and us internally. So we really have to understand what that uncertainty result means to the expectations, whether they're internal calibrations or internal customers, or external calibrations and external customers. I hope I got that right with the measurement capability index.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you give an example of how to document and take into account the level of risk?
Yeah, certainly. By documentation-wise, we can report that out on the test report or the calibration report. That can be a simple statement that with the measurement results that were found and the uncertainty of measurement that's been computed for this test or this calibration, it's a good possibility of low-level risk for the test or calibration. Or on the other side of it, that with the stability of the equipment or the test sample and the measurement process, the test process that was conducted for this sample or artifact, there's a high level of risk that the results that are presented may inadvertently or advertently affect the results for production or whatever it may be. So that standpoint, reporting that out to a customer is easy. Internally, it may be a little bit more of a different story, looking at risk from a whole perspective, not just measurement perspective. You would go through and identify, what are risks to the company. If we stick to the capabilities of the laboratory, what is the risk if we don't go out and buy a new piece of equipment? Let's say the laboratory is wanting a new piece of equipment. What is the risk of going out and buying that new piece of equipment? Well, a risk would be that the historical data and the information that's available for that piece of equipment has been around for 15 years. That time would be put to the wayside, and we'd have to start that over with the new piece of equipment. But if that piece of equipment is deteriorating and we're losing confidence in that piece of equipment, then what is the risk associated with continuing using that piece of deteriorating equipment? What is the risk for that reporting out results for a customer? That may be a high-level risk because you're running into a situation where you send out that piece of equipment on an annual basis and it's constantly failing. So the supplier has to readjust it, bring it back in as close to nominal as expected, and you keep going through that cycle. So in that circumstance, you document that internally on some sort of spreadsheet and discuss it as part of management review. That with this situation, we've got a high level risk, or we have a medium level risk, or a low level risk type situation. It all depends on having that conversation with personnel that work within that quality system to say, where are we at with this? If we continue down this path, are we at a high level risk, a medium risk, low level risk, things like that.
Okay, we had two questions that are sort of similar, so I'm going to combine them.
Okay.
What if the customer does not accept our decision but agreed to the original decision rule? And what if the customer does not accept our decision rule? Can we change it?
I'll start with the latter. Yes, you can change it. It's not a set in stone prior to agreement. So that's a conversation that needs to take place with the customer. If you have a set amount of decision rules as a conformity assessment body, you present them to the customer, because they may not know. They may not know what they don't know. So you present your situations from your experience and your competence, and you say, okay, here's some decision rules that we can apply to the measurement result or the report. Are these satisfactory? They may come back and say, no, I want you to do this type of decision rule. And that's where the conformity assessment body has to understand what that decision rule is and what it means to their measurement process. Can they meet that decision rule that the customers are expecting, or that level of risk? Can we meet that? And if we can, we document that through contract review. We sign off on it and go from there. Now, if there's that circumstance where you have an agreement on a decision rule, you provide them the results, you provide them the uncertainty, and that decision rule is applied and they don't agree with it, then, maybe from a customer service standpoint, we try to redo the test or redo the calibration to see if we can replicate it. If we can't, if we don't have that possibility, then the customer may have to go out and find another party to see what they come up with. But certainly from a customer service standpoint, we want to do what we can to make the customer happy, but we also can't alter the integrity of what's going on. So we may have to go through and retest it, recalibrate it, and see if we can replicate it. And if we replicate it to the original circumstance, then fantastic for the conformity assessment body. But if we get into a situation where we can't replicate it and we have to continue to test it or continue to calibrate it, that's really going to put an onus on the quality system of the cab to say, is our process sound? Because we're not reproducing this calibration or this test the way we should be doing.
The next question, do we have to report the measurement uncertainty on the test report, even if the customer doesn't need it?
I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier in the circumstance of calibration. Specifically with the requirements of 17025, when it talks about reporting out the results for testing, we'd have to dig into that, and I'm actually going to scroll to it here real quick to see what it says here. Okay, so 7831 talks about the relevance of a statement of conformity with the requirements of the specification. It says that in addition to the requirements listed in 782, test reports shall, where necessary for the interpretation of the test results, include the following. And B is, it says, where relevant, a statement of conformity with the requirements or specification. And then under C, it says, and this is for test reports, where applicable, the measurement uncertainty presented in the same units that the measurand, or in a term relative to the measurand. And it's just saying where applicable, and that where applicable comes into a situation. Is it a qualitative value or a quantitative value? Most qualitative values under testing will require an uncertainty. A qualitative, where I'm a metrology geek, and looking at it from that standpoint, I say uncertainty applies to everything, but it's not realistic for a qualitative situation. It either broke or it didn't. And that's the qualitative side of things. So uncertainty is probably not going to be assigned to that type of test.
Okay, then we have a follow-up question from the question on threshold. So technical assessors during accreditation assessments should not give findings that an uncertainty of 30% or even higher of the analytical result is already large, since it is the customer who can judge.
That's a situation where we have to dig into it a little bit deeper, and it may be easy to say that from the surface value, I can't answer that, but we have to understand what the performance requirements are for us internally as a cab, what our expectations are for our equipment. So if we're satisfied with that and the customer's satisfied with that, then it may be an okay situation. But there are standards that are out there that you shall meet a certain ratio to report out, a statement of conformance. And a big one is in mass metrology, within the United States. You've got to be at least a 3-to-1. In some circumstances, it may be 10-to-1. So if you're not meeting those thresholds according to a method, then ultimately you can't, because you're not meeting the requirements of the method. If the customer agrees upon it or agrees to it, then we have to have that documentation prepared to show the assessor that we've tried to meet the standard, we tried to meet the method, but the customer wanted us to deviate from our requirements, and here's the documentation that says that we were allowed to deviate from 17025 or from the method that we're using to perform the calibration or the test.
Okay, we have about 3 questions left, so we're just going to power through.
In
your examples, you use only pass and fail decision rules. Is it okay to use pass, fail, and indeterminate decision?
Yeah, absolutely. The indeterminate would be a situation where, it may be a simple acceptance, or maybe it's to the point where we have that conditional pass or that conditional fail. There is that probability that if Melanie, is it possible that I can get back the presenter? Can I do that?
Yes. Let me give it back to you. That way you can get to the slide you want to get to.
Yeah.
Okay. Nope.
Oh.
Hold on. I have to hit
sorry.
yes. There you go.
I got excited. Okay, so let's look at the question from this standpoint here. Maybe these middle two, it's showing us that we possibly pass according to the specification, or we possibly fail according to the specification. But once we start extending the uncertainty, there's that probability that we're falsely accepting or falsely rejecting that measurement. So in that circumstance there, it would be appropriate to identify that as an indeterminate result according to whatever if this is the decision rule that the customers expect and that we're trying to meet. There is that possibility that we are indeterminate whether those two measurement points there pass or fail. They fail, or let's start with the second one there. It passes according to the specification. So if we did a tolerance test, it passes. But if we look at it from the requirements of the standard, we extend the uncertainty to that, then there's that possibility and that probability that we're falsely accepting that measurement result, because the extension of uncertainty takes us beyond that specification limit. In the same way with the fail side of things. If we have that measurement that breaches the upper limit or the lower limit, there's that possibility that we're falsely rejecting that because we add the uncertainty into that situation. The uncertainty gets within that specification limit. There's that probability that we're falsely rejecting that measurement result. So that's where the indeterminants comes in.
Thanks, Ryan. The next question, is simple acceptance the easiest decision rule since it is a shared risk?
The simplest decision rule is not to have one. And I say that tongue in cheek because the liability presented to the conformity assessment body is almost nil. It doesn't remove all liability because maybe our uncertainty wasn't computed correctly or whatever it may be, but certainly it removes a lot of the liability from the measurement result. Once we start putting that acceptance rule and that statement of conformance on the report, then we've got this situation of the simple acceptance rule where it may be easily understood. And even if this excerpt is presented to the customer, this isn't proprietary knowledge. This type of image is all over the world of metrology. Take this snippet and put it as part of a document that you present to the customer and say, here's our situations. If you're accepting this situation as part of the simple acceptance rule, then we can work with that. But understand, when we have these two middle areas where there's a probability of false accept and false reject, the liability is back on the customer to make the ultimate decision whether this is good for their process or not.
Okay, and then our final question, follow up to the question on changing the decision rule. Since the decision rule is included as a contract between the CAB and the customer, then am I correct that non-acceptance of the statement of conformity given by the lab is a violation to contract?
Then am I correct that the non-acceptance of the statement of conformity given by the lab is a violation of contract? I'm not really understanding. This question, I can get this displayed on my screen, right, Melanie?
Yes, you can pull up the Q&A panel.
Okay. The question changes, since the decision rule is included as a contract between the CAB and the customer. Okay, so assuming that it's been agreed upon, then am I correct that the non-acceptance of the statement of conformity given by the lab is a violation of the contract? So if that's meaning that not providing the statement, or from a reporting standpoint, we report out whatever the results are. If there is that situation where an opinion is asked and we have to document an opinion on the calibration certificate or on the test report, and that opinion takes us into this non-acceptance, then I would say that, yeah, there's a probability that it is violating the contract. But I think that comes with just providing the data and going by what the data is and making that decision rule based on that data is more sound and easier for this situation than providing an opinion and some sort of statement from the engineer, the technician, whoever it is, that may provide some ambiguity to the acceptance or to that statement of conformity. I hope I captured that.
Then one last question came through, so
Yeah.
we'll address that. What specification do we use if the customer has established a different limit to the specifications from the manufacturer of the test equipment?
Yeah, so that would be a conversation that you would have with your customer. You know, the one thing, you know, they may want, you know, some sort of tight tolerance or tight specification that may not be achievable for the laboratory, and they may not understand what they're asking for. They just want the best. But having a conversation with them to understand what that test sample means to them, understand what that piece of equipment means to them, will help us as a conformity assessment body better understand what kind of result they're really expecting, right? Because, you know, we see it a lot in the scale and balance world that somebody wants a precision balance that has 10 places past the decimal. Well, you have a conversation with them, and they're measuring paint. You know, they're weighing paint. They don't need that precision. So if we get into that circumstance, you know, we have to understand, you know, what those specifications are, even if they're better or worse than what the manufacturer may say for that piece of equipment.
All right, well, that was all of the questions. I want to thank everyone for attending and all the questions that were submitted. This presentation, this recording, will be available on the ANAB website as soon as the recording downloads. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.